41 participants. That's nice. Yeah, let's wait a couple of minutes until they join the audio and things like that, and then we can start. If you are ready, Botond, then.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm bored to be ready.
Know that. Okay, 43. What do you think? We can start?
Yeah, let's kick this off.
Yeah.
So, very welcome to the first product management night, Budapest meetup. I'm very excited to see all of you here, even in these challenging circumstances. I want to encourage you to keep your camera on, thus we can keep this gathering as personal as possible. So yeah, let's kick this off. First, what is the Product Management Festival exactly? Pmf started in 2012 by Adrian Zwingli and Rafa Littrits to support product management as a profession. It brings product professionals and managers from different industries together to learn so they can improve together. Yeah. So what do we do? Let me show you a quick overview of what Pmf does. It has 2 annual conferences in Zurich and Singapore. Unfortunately, the Singapore event is cancelled because of the COVID-19 situation, but the Zurich event is on the schedule now. So you can check that out if you're interested. Pmf also creates the trends and benchmarks in product management report based on a global survey of product professionals. The PM nights, these are the meetups like this one, organized globally by local ambassadors. And last but not least, the product management executive program, that is a 5-day-long training designed for product leaders like CPOs, head of products or VP of products, or and so on. Yeah. You can find detailed information about everything on the productmanagementfestival.com website. So if you find any of these exciting, then go check them out. I will share the link into the chat if I find it. Where's the chat?
No worries, I will do it.
Okay. And I will move on. So yeah, the next conference will be in Zurich in November. If you're interested, go check out the website and use the discount-PM nights coupon codes at the checkout for a 20% discount. Last year, we participated in Pmf Zurich with Zoltan together, where we saw a couple of surprisingly thoughtful presentations and met more than thousands of product managers who fought with very similar issues as we have. So I can definitely say that we learned a ton there. So now you know a lot about Pmf, but almost nothing about your tonight host. So let me introduce myself first. I'm Botan Borsic. I work at Ekata, where we build a laser-accurate fraud prevention system. Currently, I'm responsible for machine learning-related developments there. And I began my product management career at Emarsis, where I studied at the product academy first, and then managed all data-related products technically. And now I'm very excited to with Zoltan together to build a product community and regular meetups here in Budapest. What about you, Zoltan? Tell us something about you.
Thanks, Botan. Hi, everyone. So yeah, we have 44 lovely people in this call. It's nice to have you here. I'm Zoltan Antal, product manager at Emarsis. I started my career as a web and mobile developer. Then I became a product owner, and now product manager step by step. So I'm currently responsible for the content personalization. You know, Immersis is a marketing automation platform. So we send a lot of newsletters and marketing communications, and I'm responsible to make sure that this is a one-to-one communication, and also for a product recommendation engine. Yeah, that's it for me. And please jump to the next slide button, because you have two lovely presenters here today. But before, let's start with a quick housekeeping. So yeah, this meeting is being recorded. I hope that you agree with that. And please post your questions on Slido. You can find the link here, and we will post the link into the chat as well. So you can ask questions during the presentations, and we will have 10 minutes afterwards to discuss the questions. Yeah, if you can, please leave the camera on, even if you have a nice quarantine beard like Botond, or you can use a nice virtual background if you want to cover your environment. So so please leave it on, because it helps the presenters to make it more personal, even in this situation that we can't do in a auditorium or something like that. Okay, and at the end, we will also put a feedback link into the chat. So please fill the feedback form so that we can improve, and the presenters as well. And there you can apply for presenter for our next session, which will be in October or something like that, but we will keep you posted. So please, the next slide button. Thank you very much. So yeah, the schedule, we will have two presenters, and the presentation, 30-minute presentation each, and then 10 minutes for the questions. So yeah, let's start with the first presenter, Fanni. Fanni is a product coach at Founders Factory, and they have found that pricing is one of the most challenging areas for the founders they work with, and they designed a pricing workshop to help them tackle pricing challenges that quickly become very popular. So Fanni will show you some practical tips that you can use to come up with the right pricing structure for your product effortlessly. Fanni, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. Let me just share my screen. Can you confirm that you can see that?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. All right, so let's move on. I'm here to talk a little bit about pricing for you today. My name is Fanni. As Zoltan said, I work as a product coach at Founders Factory, which is an incubator and an accelerator based in London. Our vision is to empower founders to grow further, faster. You'll see the the link on my slides as Bottom requested. So if you have any questions, please send it over there. Okay, for some reason I can't. Okay, interesting. All right, so today's discussion is about pricing, but just to be on a common ground, let's start with what we are not going to cover today. Some of them for the reason being that are quite outdated techniques, not optimized for profit necessarily, and others are risky unless you have some unfair advantage information that others don't have about your market. I wouldn't necessarily advise going down. Instead of that, we'll talk about strategic pricing. And one of my favorite definition of strategic pricing is it's pretty simple: set a price based on what attracts customers to maximize profitability. And basically it's relied on like three main principles. First of them being value-based. This means that the prices reflect the differences in value across customers and over time. It is also proactive, which means it anticipates those market changes and designs strategies to account for them, and even dictates the terms of various trade-offs. And it's also, lastly, it's profit-driven. Instead of comparing prices to competitors, the pricing strategy is evaluated relative to the company's alternative options. That all sounds really good, I'm sure you would say, but how do we get there, right? and we often find that challenge quite hard. And so basically, it might sound familiar, but what we would recommend you doing is that you do your homework. This is also not something that one person should be working on in isolation. It should be a team effort to get to the right pricing strategy. And we would also recommend you to test and iterate whatever your findings and hypotheses are. And basically it's the same way how we think about everything around product, right? It's kind of very simple, but what I'm trying to add to this today is a little bit of a framework that can help you think through these steps. All right, so let's jump in. Our workshops that we design is basically covers 6 areas that kind of builds upon each other or comes together at the end. The first thing is talking about most time metric, then we will move on and I will discuss this in details on the next 4 slides. Value drivers, cost and competitors, the fundraising story, which is specific to startups only, let's say. And then pricing strategy and communication strategy. Those are the last 2. So all this information that we collected across the workshop will come together and form some sort of hypothesis that we can use to create follow-up action items on. Great. So why do we need to talk about the North Star metric? So the reason for that is that whenever we talk about North Star metric, you need to understand whether like the whole team is actually following one key metric, like that you are optimizing for. And then how it comes to pricing is that you need to make sure that whatever you're optimizing for, that just is the same thing that you're optimizing within your business model. And so it's good to start a discussion and just put it out there. And like maybe if you are not like saying the same things across the whole thing, just like have a little discussion around that. And like if you can't like come to a conclusion, at least have like the 3 main metrics that you're following on your whiteboard while you are like following on the discussion, and then you can come back to it and see like whether that's aligned. Just to give you an example that like what sort of like how it changes, what a North Star metric might be is when times went from £0, so basically no, it wasn't a fee to read times, £0 to £2. They went from having 22 million daily users to only just like about 300K users. And that's a huge cut, although as a business, they were making a lot more money. So it really depends on what you are optimizing for, how your pricing decisions should be made. All right, next step is value drivers. Value drivers is like first to be able to understand what value is driving your customers to make the decision to buy into your product. You need to understand your customer segment. And there are all sorts of different ways of segmenting your customers. When it comes to pricing, the best possible way to look at, according to our findings, to a segment is to divide your segments based on their behavior. So what you need to understand is how they are like different in terms of using your products. And these questions that are on the slides, usually the questions that you're trying to ask from your teams whenever you're doing these workshops, you kind of just to understand how people behave and like whether there is like a certain segment that would benefit from this value or this feature that we are adding. And once you have the segments, then try to map the value that you're creating for them. It might be that for different segments, you're creating different values. And as we were talking about strategic pricing, the one thing that you don't want to do is to leave money on the table. We will come back to this example later. But just by understanding how many segments you have, it will help you design the right packages later on. Okay, another example, LinkedIn, just following on that. In 2005, LinkedIn decided to charge for some of its services. The company started by identifying the features that about 90% of the customers didn't use regularly. LinkedIn concluded that its service was worth more to the heavy users than it was to the casual ones. And so the company hived off the 10% of features. And power search and the ability to contact other members became the basis of premium accounts. sure enough, heavy users were willing to pay more for these features, and the premium accounts produced £248 million in revenue for LinkedIn over the next 4 quarters when they introduced that. So what essentially they did is they could have segmented the customers based on like enterprise, SME, and individual users, but instead of doing that, they went back to understand what's the usage behind and like what's the behavior difference behind that product. And they segmented based on casual users and heavy users, and that just allowed them to have a lot more money made. All right, cost and competitors. By the way, it is really hard not to like ask you to ask like if you have any questions, but yeah, we'll cover that at the end. So I guess anyway, let's move on. Cost and competitors. So none of these should be the driver of your pricing decisions at all. But you would need to understand how you will scale your product and you will scale your organization over time. And for that, you need to look at both costs and competitors. And in cost basis, like especially if you're talking about softwares, it is really not, you know, it's not linear, like whether you start like producing more product, then it's gonna like make you more profit, and also it's more costly for you each by each, because that doesn't translate into software. But you need to understand what sort of fixed and variable costs you have. Also, just you know, if you are having, for example, a longer sales cycle, that also means that you are realizing profit later on, which you know, that once you start scaling, it might potentially mean that you need more people in the sales team to cover that, and you're not necessarily paying in the SaaS market rather than an enterprise market, and which need to be reflected in your pricing strategy. So it is good to think through these things, as well as like when it comes to competitors. With competitors, it's what you want to understand is not necessarily how they do their pricing. It doesn't like you can't know for sure that they got it right. And but what you can do is you can understand what sort of value they are offering and how you're different from them. And basically what you want to look at is you take the best competitor's price level and you add your differentiator factor on top of that. That's a good price level to start thinking about, and then just start modeling around that. As an example here, musician, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a fun way to learn guitar, piano, whatever instrument that is. The direct competitors are exactly doing the same thing, a little bit differently, but actually doing the same thing. Even a sheet of music would be a direct competitor, but it also has non-direct competitors, which might be Prime Video and Netflix, because what you are competing with, if you are the product manager or musician, is that time that people spend between going to bed and after work. So it is really like good to like take that into consideration. Another example here is that when Apple launched the iPhone, critics claimed that the price was over £400, was really way out of line. But then they actually understood that hardcore group of technology innovators would easily recognize and place high value on the iPhone's unique differentiation. And by focusing on meeting the group's needs at a high price, Apple established a high benchmark for the value. And when they lowered the price to sale high of £300, that was just a no-brainer bargain in comparison to the benchmark that they already set, which is a very interesting example. Okay, next one is fundraising. And this is special to startups, maybe, but like most of the companies that I work with are startups. So fundraising is really important in terms of like, you need to understand what you need to prove for your next round. And for that, it's really good to harvest the knowledge of the investors that you were talking about. It's not only you want someone to invest in your company, but you want to find the right match within the investors. And so that like, it's really just like, whenever you're having those chats, don't be afraid of asking the questions. What do they see? Like, where do they see your company going? And cover some of these topics whenever you're having this discussion, like how defensively they see your product, and like, do they know anything, any unfair advantage about any markets? Also, it is really dependent on which sector you play in. So these things all can like should come into consideration when you're thinking about your pricing. It's maybe more like a sense check whether you are going where you should be going, rather than again a driver. But it's a really good discussion to have with your potential investors. Yeah, and then this is a SaaS pricing structure. Then all this information that we had from costs, from competitors, from value drivers, from those segments that we identified, that comes into one. And you try to identify what sort of segments that you can, what sort of packages you can create that reflects and talks to the segments that you already identified. And this is the time when you can kind of come up with the price level as well, based on the initial previous inputs, and play around how would that affect your financial forecast, how would that affect your revenue in the long term, and just see what sort of ceiling and floor and ceiling price levels would be working for your product. A really interesting, for me at least, really interesting examples are here. So there's this example that Poundstone explained in his book called Priceless, is that you have two beers. It was a real example where research that they conducted, and in a pub, and it served two beers. One of them is for $180, and the other one is for $250. And then in this case, what people bought is 20%. They bought the cheaper version of the beer, and then the 80% opted for the more expensive ones. But then they introduced a new beer which cost less, $160. In this case, how that influenced, like again, as I was talking about the packages previously, this is a kind of a new package here, and this is how it influenced people spending. Actually, no one opted for the one that was the least cheap, the cheapest, sorry, and 80% opted for the 180, and only 20% opted for the one that cost 2.50, which is really interesting how they influenced this decision. And then as a third test, what they did is they introduced an even more expensive beer on the menu. And the final result after this won't be really surprising, but still, this is very interesting that they actually 10% of the people bought the 340, and 85% bought the 250, which is basically the same beer that we had in test one, but just more people buying it. So whenever you go next to a restaurant, that just, like if you find a really expensive wine there, you will know why it's there. All right, another example here, because pricing structure is a really important part of this workshop, is that once the Economist magazine offered 3 subscription packages, an online one for £59, a print one for £125, and a combined print and online subscription also for £125. And one of the professors, this ad caught the eye of a professor who asked 100 of his students to choose between the 3 packages. And what they got is that 84 people chose the combined packages, 0 people chose the one that's the offline, and and then the rest of it chose the online only, which was cheaper. But once, as you could say, that we wouldn't need this middle package, right? That's what it says initially, because no one's buying that. We could just eliminate that function, that package. But what happens when you eliminate that package is that he asked under 100 students, and what he found is that most of the students would opt for the cheaper version, which is, so it just kind of explains that the print-only subscription doesn't have a lot of value as a package, but it influences the way customers make snap judgments. So think about these kind of tactics when you are designing your pricing structure. And finally, we arrive to communication. And this is the part that often gets neglected, because someone's working on the pricing, comes up with the best pricing strategy and all that. And now you have it with the whole team agreed on that. We should run this and see how it works and then iterate on it, right? But what you fail to think of, I mean, most of the time people fail to think of is that how do we communicate? Is that really straightforward for the customers as well? Like what we are talking about, do they actually understand what value we are creating for them? Are we making it easy for them to buy into our product instead of buying into the competitor's product? All these questions are really easily being like, it could really easily, like these risks of buying into another product can be easily mitigated just by focusing on the right way of communicating the pricing strategy of yours. I brought a lot of examples that, because everything comes together into these like communication point. Once we have that, like figured it out what we want to test, this is the dot and the I that you need to nail in order to be successful with pricing. So let's take a look at some real life examples. One thing that they are doing amazingly tight from here is that you can see that they are using an anchoring technique, which is actually showing it, like making it super clear which package you should buy. And they're making it a no-brainer, because it's exactly the professional package here costs the same as the essential package, with the only addition that, of course, like for the professional one, you would need to buy into this product for a whole year, which absolutely makes sense from typeform perspective. But also as a customer, you feel like, well, I'm paying exactly the same amount of money. I'm just getting so much more with the professional package. Why wouldn't I buy the professional package, right? So that's really a great technique to drive people to a package that you want them to buy. Another example, and I love this product personally, is Everno. Is what they are making really easy for me here is to identify with the packages. Like they are not going into long list of features. By the way, that never works. What they do is that they are telling like who I'm like. They're telling me who I am, and hence which product is best suited for me. So if I'm just like a casual note taker, but I really like taking notes, then probably the free package is the right match for me. But if I'm a little bit more controversial, I believe that organizing everything is the way to go, then I will know that this is the package that speaks for me, right? And then once I have a bigger team and I want to use this as a collaboration, then we can move. Then I know that probably the next package is the right for our team. Yeah, another one with Slack. And I said like long list of features. Yeah, those are the ones that less likely to work. What they did here, I would still encourage talking about outcomes than necessarily listing features, but in some cases it does make sense to have a list of features. In those cases, it is really great way of highlighting what the value of each package is, rather than showing everything. Just showing the top things that's making enough value for the customer to opt into this package. Also with B2B businesses, oftentimes you don't have enough data, or it's just like, it's really different, like how big your clients are in the enterprise package. So you might want to just put it in like get in touch with us and like have an individual pricing for all of these companies. The only downside of that, whenever you're not like showcasing any price, is that if your competitors do, people are likely to opt to competitors who are transparent about their pricing, because people tend to think that this is just, it's way too expensive, and like, you know, it's just one more step. It's one more barrier for me to get to know what the price is, and like, you know, like I know that it's going to be like a negotiation in between the two companies to come to the final price. So yeah, just think about that whenever you are thinking about showcasing or not showcasing your price on your website. Another example here that's really powerful is that even though this pricing, I think it could be simplified down a little bit, what Monday.com does is that, you have the prices in front of you. They don't want to like add it up to like 15 users, because if you multiply it, that just, initially what they want to show you is that it's not that expensive. But you know, once you see that and you start, like, you would need to do your own brain work to see like how it is, how much it's gonna cost if you're buying it for your whole team. So this was an often like a very, very regular use case. So they just had that, added that top bar. But if you're moving that, then you will see like how much it would cost you if you're buying this product for more people. Hence helping you making that decision to buy into the product. Yeah, and then another example, and I love the simplicity of this one, is Strava. Strava, I'm not sure everyone's familiar with that. That company, what they do is a social platform where you can record and share your workouts, mainly cycling and running and all that. And what they do is, and it's brilliant, what they do is that they get you addicted, and there with certain features is always going to be for free. And you know, activity recording, like as much as you put into the product, as more the more valuable it becomes for you. So you want, there is a high cost of leaving to another competitor, and this is always for free. And like once you get like addicted, then the rest of the things just like become features under the subscription. For example, they just changed after seeing that people loved the segment competition, which meant that like in like London, there are lots of segments out there, and you can see like what's your ranking compared to the rest of the people who actually went through the exact segment route in London. And it is really amazing that like in the beginning it was for free, and what they discovered is that people are actually like really interested in knowing like how far down the line they are compared to other people. So once that like became clear, they just moved it under subscription, and whoever was already recording that now are thinking about moving into subscription. They won't, like, they might be a little bit unhappy, but they won't ever move away from Strava because they already had so many things recorded in Strava, and it would be just too big of a barrier to leave that behind. Right, yeah, Amplitude. This is, as you can see, there are not many prices here. But what they do is, because they are losing a little bit of trust and not displaying the price here, what they do to counterpart that is to name some companies that you can identify with easily that this package suits for. And another technique that's really funny that, not necessary, but is often used, it is always going to be free. A lot of startups says that their product for a certain amount of people is always going to be free. Yeah, of course, until you start scaling, and then you will pay back all those money for you. But this is also a good thing. This is, again, once you started like working with the product and you have so much data within that product, you are less likely to leave. So they just get you to a point where you're less likely to leave. So now you can ask for money. Yeah, the last examples here is showing some comparison to other products, and that just again increases trust. In the TransferWise example, even if they are not providing the best exchange rates, they tell you who does, and people are less likely to leave and do the unknown user journey to do like with an unknown company that they don't necessarily had experience with, and just to exchange money there because of a little bit of difference between the two companies, and they're likely to opt the version that they already know, and also it does increase the trust in the product. And bear with me, this is just a picture on the right hand side about Virgin Media, who does this comparison really simply put with the other two providers here. just to make sure that everyone understands what's the value that they are giving to you and for how much. Yeah, these were the examples. And so that's kind of the whole idea behind this workshop and gathering all this information. And the last question one might ask is like, when can I make use of this? I do believe that it has like certain, like it can be helpful in different stages of your product development. One is the before launch, when you're a small startup, it's less likely that you will have enough data to understand what the pricing structure should be. But what you can do just by thinking through these steps is collecting all those hypotheses and make sure you are tracking everything that we would need to have a decent discussion about pricing strategy in 3 months of time after launch. This is just being a little bit proactive. When you are in the growth stage, then you have better data to act upon, and then disprove your hypothesis that you already created and create new ones. And this is test and iterate. And people are really afraid of changing prices, but that shouldn't be a big issue until you are being really transparent about it. I would encourage you to change prices and also test. Not up to a point where like people think that you know, like you're changing prices every week, but try to find some like smart way of doing maybe multivariate testing or just some ad tests or that in that. By the way, with B2B, a way of testing could be also just using the sales pitches as interviews as well. And like, if you like, don't ever ask the question, why would you, or how much would you pay for it? It's that's just hypothetical and less secure. You ask the questions like, okay, what's the budget? Like, what was the last product that went through this process and you bought into as a company, and how did that process looks like, how long it took, and then you can look up the prices of that product and kind of have a benchmark. Just try to find some background there. And in the maturity stage, again, everything is changing, not only your business, but also your customers, as well as your product is becoming more mature, right? So it is a good thing to proactively revisit those hypotheses and the pricing structure going forward. All right, well, thank you very much for having me. Any questions you have, I'll open up Slido now and I'll try to answer those, but yeah, happy pricing and thank you. Oh wow, we got some questions. Should I go?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Fanni.
Oh, I will share my screen, so I will show the questions so everyone will see.
Okay, thank you, because I couldn't.
Okay.
Okay, amazing. Which one do we start with? Is on the top or the bottom?
The top.
Yeah, the first one, it's the most popular. And since we are pretty much on time, we have 10 minutes for the questions. So go on, Fanni.
Okay, cool. Do you have any info on how switching pricing strategy A to B affected the revenue of those companies? Which company that we are talking about specifically here?
I can type this in the chat.
Yeah, it would be, yeah, because I mean, so.
Button, can we just unmute Mate?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
Be a little context.
Mate. Yeah. Mate, go on. The stage.
Yeah, so the question is referring to those examples, for example, that you mentioned for anchoring and the other techniques. So I'm not sure if you have any info on.
Yeah, I don't not have necessarily, unless they are willing to share and it's publicly available on the internet. I can't. I don't have a way to figure out like how it costs, but I would assume that since they changed that and moved to that like they probably wouldn't keep that way if it wasn't worth for them. So I can't tell you an exact number, and I would assume that in each case is very different. But it seemed like a right decision for them because they kept it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so next question.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on free trials and any strategy on that? Yeah, free trials. So what they usually say about free trials is that after, I think it was 8 days or around a week, it doesn't add any value if your free trial is longer than that. So that's just one thing to take into consideration. That it's for people that doesn't necessarily give more value. So, and that just would mean that you are not getting money earlier. So don't have a very long free trial if that's possible. Also, now it's it seems like people are trying to shift away from this and going for more around the premium version, and because that they can keep for a longer period of time. And the whole point there is to showcasing the value to the customer as early as possible. So in products where you can do that with free trials and you can win the customer over the trial to be in love with your product and to stick to it and buy that, then that absolutely makes sense. Other cases, if you need more time for people to invest into the product, then I would think about whether like a freemium would be a way to go there. Gary, does this answer your question? It's really hard not to like have a discussion around here. But yeah, all right. So, Gary,
yeah, thanks. Perfect. Thank you, Fanni.
No worries. Actually, the next question is also yours. That's trending, which is differentiating pictures. Yes, this is a really a valid question. And localization should be a way. Should be a way of going into different markets, because I'm not sure about the numbers, but this is also available. I can also send it later. The latest numbers of that. But for softwares, the actually UK people are more likely to pay about like 10% more than in the US, while in Asia it would be about like 15% less. So it does make sense to think about localizing the prices of your product for sure to different geographies, and like try to like conduct different research in each area. Okay. Sometimes the business doesn't have transparent pricing, when it's beneficial to use transparent pricing and when it should be hide it. So yeah, so we covered a little bit of that, where we discussed about the B2B pricing. That's the most often the time when people are companies are not sharing the prices. So I can see two cases mainly where it makes sense not to share the pricing. One of them is in the beginning, when you are in the early stages of your product development and you just don't know, and you would need more data, especially if you are on the B2B side, to understand and to test like what sort of value that you're creating and how much you can ask for that. And those data can come through discussions, individual sales discussions and negotiations. So that would be one time when you're not sharing prices. But then moving forward to that, at least having some indicators about how much it would cost can actually, even if you're not sharing prices, but just like approximately sharing like business cases and like how much was the ROI of using your product or whatever, can really drive people to get in touch with you and like start at least a discussion. I wouldn't say that hiding it is beneficial at any time, but it does make sense in the case that I just shared, but also in the other case that if you are having enterprise companies, and enterprise companies can be really different in sizes, and that you need to kind of sometimes come up with like a custom pricing, because some of them might just use it your product I don't know, with 10 users and on a weekly basis, and the other big customer would use it a lot more often. In those cases, when those are like really different scenarios and really different contracts, then it doesn't really make sense to showcase that, because people might have false understanding of the pricing, and they would think either it's too high or too cheap. Okay, sorry. How would you test compare prices in a B2B industry, pharma, where all prices are confidential by contract and an average sales cycle is 2 to 3 years? Yeah, really good question. Yeah, 3 to 2 years, that's already telling you that you are in the enterprise business, most likely. So the prices are quite high, or should be really high. Test and compare prices. Is there any other companies who, maybe it's not necessarily in the sector, who you understand that they would do something similar, that you could benchmark it a little bit? Maybe that would be a way to go about understanding the price level. And then testing and comparing the prices, I mean, that's the comparing bit. And then the testing the prices is here, but the only thing that you can do, or I could think of, but if anyone else has any other way of doing that, please do share. I'm also really interested, is to have a better, is to have personal relationships with those companies, and try to figure out with like these workaround questions, what sort of budget they have for this product, what other products they bought into, how much was that, how long did it take? All these questions can be like asked once you have like a better relationship with one of those one of the people from the other side. But if anyone else has a better tip here, I'm also all ears. Okay. In the beer example, how the overall volume varied over the cheese? That's a really good question. Don't know. I don't know. It's yeah. I would assume that it's very similar. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. But that was published in a scientific book. But I honestly don't know. Oftentimes, with complex products, you will want to have add-ons to packages. Any good advice on when to include in the package and when to sell as extra? Oh, nice. Yeah, so add-ons, it is like, for example, one of the companies that I can think of is Zapier. What they do is they have the separate packages, and then they also have add-ons as additional tasks. I don't know if everyone is familiar with Zapier. It just basically integrates everything, and you can create like it also works as a project management tool, and you have all these tasks, and like you have a cap in each package about the task. And because the task is really irrelevant of who the users are or what segment they belong to, and which package they are, they might become this, like it's imagine it as a matrix, and the power users just by using the task. So what they did is, instead of you needing to upgrade to go to the next package, you can just buy more tasks to do, and you're actually paying more for Zapier. But at the same time, you are getting exactly the value that you are needing. So if you can identify something that is really a key value driver across all segments, irrelevant of the rest of the product, then it would make sense to put it as an add-on rather than putting it into the package.
Thank you very much, Fanni. I think the time is past, so yeah, so we have to move on to our next presenters. It was very nice having you here, and you had an interesting topic, because we can't hear very often about pricing in conferences and meetups, so I enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And as I said, if anyone is interested in this topic and has some experience to share or chat about pricing, please feel free to reach out to me. And it was a pleasure for me to participate today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Fanni.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next presenter is Kristof Litovets, and he will speak about jobs theory, that aims at figuring out how to innovate and build products that solve real customer problems, or as they call it, jobs. Kristof also works at Immersis as a product manager, but I will hand it over to him and he can introduce properly.
Excellent, thanks, Oli, and I'm glad to see so many people here today. And again, thanks for Fanni for the very insightful presentation on pricing. So as Oli said, I'm a product manager at Immersis. I look after content management and email and the web channel right now. And as you know, I'll talk about jobs theory and share my experience there. And before I forget, I also wanted to thank the two MCs, Zoli and Boton, for organizing this, and Pmf for promoting the event. Just wanted to say this up front before I forget it in the end. So I'll, without further preamble, I'll start and I'll get into the presentation. So what I want to talk about today is the jobs theory. As I said earlier, I'll talk a little bit about what the theory means, and how this relates to personas, and how we made use of some of it here at Immersis, and finally I'll have some very clever conclusions in the end that hopefully you can all take away and use in your lives. So a bit of housekeeping rules again. You know the link by now, but any questions in the end, I look forward to receiving them. Please don't forget to post them there. So to get started, when I joined Immersis about a little bit less than a year ago, I obviously I was asking the questions how we prioritize what we want to build. I think this is a question that is on the top of our minds in any product role. And I previously worked for an online travel agency, so it was a very different industry, a very different type of business that we were working on. And Fanni also touched on this earlier. Having a North Star metric and understanding what is driving your business and how you're getting better at it is really important. So I was trying to sort of figure out, what this is for us. And some companies define their North Star metric by looking at the attention and trying to get as many eyes on the screen as possible. Others, like Amazon and Walmart, for instance, they want to have more transactions. That's the type of business that I used to work for, where we were looking at the incremental bookings that we would generate with any product innovation that we were doing. And then also there are other types of companies that measure productivity to make sure that they improve their users' lives and day-to-day workflows. And so, as I said, I was looking at what is our North Star at Immersis? How can we define one for us as a product team building a content management or an email editor? We looked at a bunch of things. I looked at how adoption is changing over time. We looked at how the click-through rate is being influenced by all the things that we did, and I wasn't really satisfied with any of that, and I kept digging. And what I came to realize over time is that obviously this is a very different industry, being in a B2B SaaS business. First of all, this is a very high touch type of business. In other words, there is not a very high volume of customers that we're working with. And consequently, there are not a lot of data points when it comes to usage of the product. We don't have the hundreds of millions of touch points on our product every day, like you would have on a website, on a hotel website that I used to work before, and therefore it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to draw conclusions, at least from a statistical point of view. And lastly, some of the customers that we work with just require very different custom integration with us, and they use our products in a slightly different way. So that's when I stumbled upon this book that some of you might already know. It's called the Competing Against Luck by Clayton and Christensen and a few other authors. And this is the theory, the jobs theory that they talk about that I want to discuss today. And basically, what they claim in the book as well is that innovation doesn't have to be dependent on luck, but instead of what you should be doing is understanding what is the job that the customers are hiring a certain product for, and this can be any number of different types of products. It can be physical goods or even online software, but I'll go into that in a little bit. So what they start talking about first in the book is that 95% of the product innovations fail, and it's often because of ineffective segmentation. When they look at what the types of customers are, and I think Fanni mentioned this slightly from a different angle as well, that you don't just want to look at enterprise, SME, and individual users and look at their actual personal attributes, but what you want to look at instead is what is the job that they're trying to get done by hiring your product. So moving ahead, what's important to understand, and most of you probably know this, is correlation isn't causation. So looking at the data is important, and understanding who your customers are is definitely important. But just like you see on this graph, there is a very strong correlation between the sale of ice cream and forest fires, for instance. But it doesn't mean, fortunately, that if you eat more ice cream, there will be more forest fires. Another example, which is a similar one, is linking sale of ice cream and the weight of per person, and this shows a correlation as well, that if you eat more ice cream, you should get thinner, which is again obviously not true. There is probably a reason for this correlation, that in the summer months people just want to look nice and have their body beach ready for basking in the sun. So moving forward, let's assume that I read the New York Times, and if you look at my personal attributes, I'm 33 years old, I'm 182 centimeters tall, I'm married, have 2 kids, and I drive a Nissan. None of these attributes is going to cause me to start reading the New York Times. Instead, the reason why I might start reading is because I hired the New York Times to get a specific job done for me. Maybe I want to see the business numbers from the stock exchange, or I'm interested in the latest NBA game, or whatever that may be. But understanding just the personal attributes and the numbers isn't going to explain that causation. So that's why it's important to look at what that job is that I hired the product for. And a job is basically what a person is trying to accomplish in a specific circumstance. And it's important to understand that the circumstances also explain certain social and emotional dimensions of the product, not just the functional ones, but I'll touch on that in a little bit as well. So there is an interesting experiment that some of you might have heard of, which is called the Milkshake Dilemma, where basically what the authors of the book did, there was a fast food restaurant chain that was trying to increase the sale of their milkshake, and they tried all sorts of different demographic analysis, customer analysis, looked at psychographic variables, but all of these data crunching failed, and they couldn't increase the sale of their milkshakes. And finally, what they did is they realized that 40% of the milkshakes were sold at a very specific time in the morning, just before the people were leaving for their morning commute. And it turned out, and this is somewhat related again to pricing and what Fanni was talking about there, that the competitors that the Milkshake at that point was looking at wasn't milkshakes anymore. It was bananas and perhaps bagels, because what you hired the Milkshake for was to fill your tummy before you get to work and not feel hungry in the first 5 meetings that you're attending, etc. But you know, bananas were a bit messy while you're driving in the car. It's not so easy to peel bananas. I don't know if any of you have tried it, but it is certainly messy. And you know, eating bagels are dry. You get thirsty, or you know, if you drink coffee, it's good, but it doesn't prevent you from being hungry that long, etc. So just by understanding what the Milkshake was trying to accomplish, what the outcome was that the customers were trying to do, they then later on managed to tailor the milkshakes for that specific need, and they changed the viscosity, the size of the cup, they added straws and whatever other product improvements they did, but it all came out of understanding what the job was that the customers were trying to do. So it's important, therefore, and I think that's the bottom line here, that products do not match people. Products match specific problems. So there is this famous saying, again, people don't want to buy a 1/4 inch drill, they want a 1/4 inch hole. So you've got a certain product, you want to use it in a way to get to a specific outcome, and understanding that outcome is the key here. And maybe in this example, you know, you shouldn't even buy a drill. You could just glue the picture to the wall and you'd be just as happy. But if you focus on, you know, I want to get a 1/4 inch drill, and the salesman at the hardware shop just gives you a drill without asking why you want to do that, you might end up with a lot more expensive solution. So to get to that outcome, what the book and the theory talks about is you really want to understand not just the functional, but also, as I said earlier, the emotional and social dimensions of the product. And what they mention here is you really want to dig deep and find out, you know, what the circumstances are that the users are trying to use your product. Understand what experiences they made, what are the obstacles that they are trying to remove. That here's an example to show this. So for example, the job that you're trying to get done is you want to travel to another city, and obviously it has some functional elements, the total travel time, the luggage that you can carry with yourself, how much it costs, etc. But also there are some very important emotional elements, like how comfortable it is, how respectfully you're treated, you know, how presentable you remain, etc. So another example that we experienced on our end at Amasis was the email editor that we're working with, and the job there that our users are trying to do is send out personalized marketing emails to improve their sales, right? It's pretty straightforward. And often what I found is that we focus on the functional elements. Yeah, let's make this all faster, improve the process by, you know, adding more personalization, etc. But then, for example, here with the email, you also have some of the personal elements, because you want to enjoy the design, want to create pretty looking campaigns, and then you also want to present it to your manager later on. And that's one of the aspects that we realized that testing your email campaigns is actually a very important feature. It's more important than we perhaps thought in the beginning, and that's why we gave it priority as well on our end, because when you're testing your email campaigns and looking at what it looks like, that's when you as a marketeer actually go out to your boss and show your work to him. So, you know, all your promotions and all the recognition that you may get comes from that moment, how well you can test and present the email campaigns to your superiors. So therefore, you know, it became clear by understanding all those emotional elements of the process and the job that you know, sending test mails is perhaps more important than we initially thought. So how do you get to the bottom of these emotional and social elements of the job? And here again, the book talks about extracting the first thought. So when we look at traditional customer interviews, we usually look at the period when the users start actively consuming your product, right? Like they started using it, this is the onboarding experience, this is how they go through the funnel, and then finally they're happy or they chat. But what they talk about here is that it's really important to go actually a step back and understand what the first thought was when this problem arose in their heads, that something is not working, there are some obstacles that I want to overcome. You know, finally get to a point where you make a decision of buying a certain product, then you get onboarded and you start actively consuming it. So there's a famous interview that I've got in the notes and the resources of the presentation that I'd recommend checking out as well. It's about the usage of mattresses and the choice that a person made on buying a new mattress, and they actually go through this discussion live on stage and how and why he did this, made this decision, and they basically frame it as a documentary. But let's imagine we go back to the time when you when the first thought came to your mind, and where were you, who were you with, what triggered you to make this decision. And by understanding the whole environment can be really insightful of understanding what the problem is that they are trying to solve. We had a couple of interviews recently with some of our customers about our recent free web channel product, and by going deep, we also understood with one specific customer, what situation they were in. Their graphical designer just left, and they were trying to get something really easy out of the market. And by understanding that specific need and how they came to the conclusion that they wanted to use us, it made really clear on what we need to focus and how we need to improve our content editing product to make it easier for them to launch web channel campaigns, and what are the specific features that they want to have plug and play without having a graphical designer on there. So it's easy to do with consumer goods, but how do you get to that first thought in enterprise software, right? In an enterprise setup, you've got multiple different people involved, so it's somewhat more difficult, but it's not impossible. And you can still think about some questions like the ones that I listed up here. Who was working on the previous software? Who made the decision? What was it like to work with the previous solution, etc., etc. But it's really useful to go back to that mindset, even if it's an organizational mindset, to understand what triggered the decision. Excellent. So by understanding the customers, I'm sure some of you who work with product also work with personas, and maybe even with job theory and customer journeys. And I was wondering how this all comes together. So the analysis we've got specifically for the email editor, we've got 3 personas that we actively look at. We've got Teresa, who's the head of online marketing, Agnes, who's a campaign executive. She's the one doing all the heavy lifting in the email editor. And then we've got her boss, Richard, who's a campaign manager, who's more interested in coordinating all the campaigns, etc. So we've got these personas. One that we are missing perhaps is a decision maker, chief marketing officer, and I'll tell you why. So in the B2B world, the person who is making the decision about buying a certain solution is often not the same as the person who's using it. So understanding the jobs of your user and looking at all this functionality of how to make the application faster and better looking, etc., is very, very important. However, you also want to look into the aspect of the actual buyer, may that be a chief marketing officer, whoever is the person who's making the decision. Because unless you convince her, nobody will be using your product. So the first thought can come up with any different personas. It can come from the marketing executive or the campaign manager, or even from the chief marketing. But the actual buying happens only, or mostly, in most companies, with that senior executive who makes the final call on whether or not you go ahead with a certain solution. And then obviously later on, various people use the tool to various extent. So great, we've got personas, but how does it connect to jobs theory and maybe even customer journeys? So the team at Udemy did a workshop, and they've got a great podcast about how they think about this whole question, and I quite liked the framework that they came up with. But basically what they say is that the personas are responsible for all the attitudinal questions, like the who and all the roles and attributes of that person. The jobs is more explaining the why and what they are trying to accomplish. What is the job that they're trying to get done? And underneath that, obviously, there is an actual customer journey that that you have, that these personas go through. That is really important to understand, to know what are the different steps, what are the interesting checkpoints and motivators for that person. So in this case, you've got a campaign manager, for example. The job that they are trying to accomplish is, turn around the business because the company is losing money, and the journey is basically how to create campaigns to retain customers more. So so these three tools come really well together and can be used in combination to have a full picture of your customers. So in Masters, we also have as I said, the personas, and we tried to look at some of the who they are, attitudinal facts, the different behaviors, the years of experience, what sort of teams they are working for, etc. But that's the reason why we also added some of the situational aspects of, like, what are the different goals and needs of this person, what are different problems that they are trying to solve, the different jobs, if you will, that they are trying to accomplish. And then lastly, we also did a journey mapping workshop so recently, where we looked at what the whole content creation journey is, what are the different steps, hurdles, the tools, the needs, etc. throughout this process. And now it's really useful to go back to this journey map whenever we build any product along in the content management space, to know, like, is this really catering for some of these needs, and do we answer all the questions? Did we consider the mindset of the customer well? So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. But a final wrap up of what I mentioned. So quality is very important. So there's a trend to look at data and crunch data all the time, which is I'm not saying it's not important. It is very important to understand your numbers and know what your North Star metric is, but it's also important to go deep and do qualitative research to understand the why. And don't forget that correlation isn't causation. It's easy your brain can trick you into looking at numbers and draw a conclusion that if there are more ice cream sales and wildfires, then there is a causation between the two. To understand the circumstances, not just the characteristics of the customers, is really important. Remember, products match problems and not people. And to get deeper, you want to know what the emotional and social elements of the product are. In order to get to that, you want to understand what the first thought is, recreate that sort of environment when the customers started thinking about solving a specific problem. And perhaps in the B2B SaaS business more so than in others, you want to take care of your buyers as well, not just the users that are using the product, because they are a very important stakeholder as well. And I've got a conclusion extra that I wanted to mention. Some of you might know Richard Feynman, who's a Nobel laureate in physics, and he had a very famous learning technique that I wanted to share today. And he basically says that there are 4 very important steps to learn something very deeply or understand the topic. One is choose a concept that you want to learn about. For me, that was jobs theory, so that's tick. The second step is pretend that you are teaching it to a student in grade 6. So that's you guys, so that's a tick. And third, identify gaps in your explanation, go back to the source material to understand better. So I'm looking forward to receiving all the questions that you might have in Slido. And then obviously you can go back and review and simplify. And hopefully the next time around when I get into this or when we use it, I'll learn from it. So again, big thanks for the PMF team and Zoli and Boton for organizing it. And thanks for having me and listening to me today.
Thank you very much, Kristof. Thank you for your presentation. As far as I can see it, we have a couple of questions for you. And yeah, let's start with the first one. We are on time, so we have enough time for all the questions discussed. Kristof.
Sure. So what is the best way to tackle social, emotional aspect in case the customer segmentation industry covers a big range? I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, to be honest. So I think what you're trying to say that the type of customers that you're working with can come from very different industries and from a very big range. Okay. So again, I think, you know, I'm no expert at this, but I think what I found and what is interesting here is, again, going back to the customers and talking to them. And what I recently found is that doing as few as 10 customer interviews, but going really deeply into them and trying to understand those problems, you can already identify some patterns. And maybe they are not yet proven at that stage, but they give you a really good hint into some of the hypotheses that you can later verify and maybe look into data and understand. So one example could be just think about it. So the recent one that we had was, we know that some of our customers in our back channel campaigns want to use what we call a subscription campaign, where, you know, you see this on websites where a pop-up comes and you enter your email address and then you type it in, and then with that you subscribe to your newsletter. So some of the customers, many of the customers mentioned this when in recent interviews you talk to them.
Kristof, are you still with us?
I thought that it is my internet connection, but it turns out that it's Kristof's. We lost Kristof. Let me try contact with him.
Apologies, I dropped off. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
it's all right now.
Yeah, I don't know how far you heard me.
Actually, you started to explain the web extend example.
Sure. So basically what I was saying is that by talking to customers, we understood a basic problem, and we assume that this is something that a wider audience needs. So it gave us an opportunity to put something together very quickly that we can put out to the market, and then start testing whether this is really going to improve the adoption of that specific product. So even if you have a wider customer range, those are just specific attributes. You know, they might be from pharma and mining. I don't know what the product is, but they might have a the very same problem that they are trying to solve. So by talking to a good segment of them, and that could be as few as 10 customers, and going really deep into what they're trying to accomplish, you know, why they chose your product, what was the situation like when they decided to get on board, can be very insightful. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Let's check the next one. How do I know that I choose the right North Star?
See, we've got a Northampton fan over there. It's a really tough one. I don't know. I think it's a test and learn, I suppose. The companies that I worked for, that I had experience with, they didn't get it right for the first time around. And even for example, my previous company, we're looking at the incremental bookings per day that each product was bringing in. In the end, we found that when you totaled the incremental bookings that each product or feature claimed to generate, it was 8 times more than the actual increase in bookings. So it's never really perfect. That, I guess what's interesting to understand is how you can link it to what the users are doing. Like, it's obviously, you don't want to have more viewers on Amazon because it's not going to help you, but you're after the transaction. So there are probably a couple of articles out there on this, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to answer that question in more detail, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one, Gergő's question.
What ways
go on, Kristof.
What ways you found most useful to figure out the original jobs and problems to be solved when you only get feature requests without a solution or without proper context? So I guess it goes back to what I said earlier. I think what I found, many people say, talking to a few customers isn't statistically significant. It's just a subset of the people that you talk to, and it's not going to give you enough insight. And I think what I learned is that if you have the depth of that conversation and you ask the right questions, and there are a lot of checklists on how to use jobs theory to create that sort of documentary type experience, and going deep back to the first thought, that can result in very insightful answers.
Wonderful. Next one is Gergő again. How do you translate business metrics like bookings/revenue to product metrics, especially with B2B, where the sales cycle is super long?
Great question. Honestly, I think I don't really know how we do that specifically in our case, where the sales cycle is very long. But what I do find that even if the North Star metric is difficult to link it to product metrics one-to-one, having it and optimizing for it does create alignment across the organization, because it does give you that North Star that you're all shooting for. So like, I know that some of the online publications are crazy about getting conversion rates, and there are downsides to it as well, because you can over optimize for conversion, but at least it puts it out there, and it's clear for everybody in the organization that that's the number one metric that you're trying to optimize for. there, in my experience, there are situations where you go, well, actually, it would be short-sighted if we did that just to optimize for incremental bookings on a short term or incremental revenue or more viewers in exchange for a longer term investment. But that's okay, because you made that decision consciously, and it wasn't, you know, a hunch, but you actually did the research. You looked at you know, how a certain feature might improve your numbers, and you may decide that you go against it because of some strategic questions.
Okay, next one. Could you explain competitors and job theory?
I'm trying to guess what the question here is, but once you and you saw that in the Milkshake Dilemma example, once you understand what the job is that the customers are trying to solve, you often find out that the competitors that you are up against are not even in the same industry. So let me give you another hands-on example that we see often. So we've got feature in our email editor where you can manage campaigns in multiple languages, right? You can go in and then you can add different languages, translate the content, and then send it out in one go, and then everybody will get their right language version of the email campaign. And then we found that often customers are not doing the translation within our system, and the biggest competitor against that is Excel. It's just simple enough, it's good enough, because the job that they are trying to do is have an overview where all the translators can go in, see the different translations, and it's all on one page. You don't have to switch back and forth. It's not loading that long. So by understanding the job, you often find that the competitors lie outside of your industry, outside of your of the companies that you thought you were competing with, and I think that's again a very valuable insight to have. Just like with the milkshake, it was competing with bananas, not necessarily with the other milkshakes from other fast food restaurants.
Okay, perfect. And we have time for one last question.
A good example where I used this framework successfully. So I mentioned one about our recent web channel free version. Then the other one I'd say that is a big one was how we realized that testing emails has that emotional element for our customer, and how that is a lot more important than perhaps being able to do translations or, you know, adding more and more features into the product. But having better testing solutions is very important for our customers. I hope that gives you a tangible enough example.
Thank you, Kristof. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was nice to having you here. And let me hand it over to Botond for a quick outro. And thanks everyone for joining again.
So yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation, just like we do. I promise we will have we will organize pizzas and beers next time when this pandemic is over. We would like to hear your honest opinion as we want to improve. So we prepared a really short feedback form. I will share that in the chat also, so you don't have to type that much. Don't worry, it won't take more than 3 minutes to complete or something like that.
Yeah, it's 6 questions and only 3 of them is mandatory.
Yeah.
So no worries.
Also, you will find both Zoltan's and my contact details there. So if you want to contact us or suggest something for us, then you will find our contact information there. I suggest checking the feedback form. In the meantime, I would like to thank both of our presenters for delivering these fantastic presentations tonight. Fanni, your approach to simplify the pricing hustles is pretty fascinating. I have to say that. Kristof, I believe Jobs to be done is a very exciting way of thinking about how to make sure we will deliver real value to our customers. Yeah, again, thank you both for coming tonight. We really appreciate you accepted our asks. Also, I want to thank Anna from Pmf for helping to organize this event. We couldn't make this live without you, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. We will keep this Zoom meeting open for a minute or so in case you didn't find the feedback form yet. So please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any suggestions or exciting presentations worth sharing or something like that. Stay safe out there and stay tuned for future events. Thank you.
Have a nice evening, everyone.
Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes, bye-bye.